On Monday, the U.S. government formally declared China a currency manipulator. That's a mostly symbolic action, but it is likely to raise tensions between the two economic giants. And the move came hours after China devalued its currency, the yuan, which caused the main U.S. financial indices to fall by more than 3%. That was after the Trump administration announced increased tariffs on a further $300 billion in Chinese imports last week. And when that fully comes into effect next month, it'll mean virtually every product China exports to the U.S. will be subject to extra taxes. Let's bring in our White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett. She's joining us from Washington, D.C. And the president has been up and tweeting and defending the decision to label China a currency manipulator, Kimberly.
Yeah, the view of the Trump administration and the president specifically is that the United States is in a stronger position in this tit-for-tat trade war turned currency war that has been escalating for quite some time in comparison to where China stands right now. The feeling is that the United States economy is still strong, resilient enough to withstand some of the bumps and bruises that seem to be as a result of this back and forth. And that's what the president was talking about on social media, on Twitter specifically this morning, making the case that the United States so far has benefited from this trade war. Not everyone would agree with that, but that he's saying that companies that had been located in China are now looking to the United States, more favorable conditions for doing business, and also that the United States is benefiting from those tariffs that are put in place on Chinese imports into the United States. That also is being debated. Still, the White House is defending it. The top economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, speaking to reporters in the driveway behind me here at the White House in the last couple of hours, saying that the bottom line is that the United States cannot tolerate not only currency manipulation, but also intellectual property theft from China. And as a result, it has drawn a line in the sand. It believes this is the right approach. And it also knows that or at least the argument is being made, is that the president believes the bigger the risk, the higher the stakes, the bigger the reward.
This is a transformative president who is going in many places where prior presidents in both parties have feared to tread, and he is determined. He's rebuilding the American economy, which is going very strong. And I think part of that has to be trade.
Now, the president sent out two tweets about this escalation between the United States and China. The second one's addressed the concerns of farmers specifically. Now, this is where there has been a big pinch being felt here in the United States. American farmers really counted on China for particularly soybean exports. As a result of this escalation, China, just in recent days, ordered its state-run companies not to purchase U.S. agricultural goods. This is going to hurt American farmers even further than these trade war tariffs that have been going back and forth. We've already seen the United States give American farmers 2 aid packages. The president, in his Twitter tweet today, saying that there could be the potential for another aid package, saying he will stand with farmers. But what I can tell you in the midst of all of this is we've seen the stock markets tumble, concerns about the strong U.S. economy suddenly starting to take a hit with a possible concern of recession. That this is a big political gamble for the president on top of everything else. American farmers make up a big part of his base, so he's taking a huge risk here, not only just in terms of upending the global economy, but potentially putting his re-election in 2020 at risk.
All right, so Kimberly Halkett, thank you. Scott Heidler has the view from Beijing.
The trade war between the United States and China has reached concerning new territory. The U.S. Treasury Department, for the first time since 1994, has labeled China as a currency manipulator. This is because over the last couple of days, the yuan, the Chinese currency, has gone up to over 7 per U.S. dollar. Now, that's a territory, a symbolic territory that it hasn't crossed in quite some time. That raised concern. That also had knock-on effect with markets around the world. After that label was issued by the United States Treasury Department, pushback from the Chinese government refuting that claim. And also it seemed as though the Chinese government on Tuesday pumped the brakes a little bit because offshore trading of the yuan went down below that symbolic 7 yuan per dollar mark. So obviously a lot of back and forth. This, of course, comes after what we heard just at the beginning of the week, President Trump announcing a new round of tariffs on $300 billion of Chinese goods going to the United States. Now, this is something, there was a discussion last week in Shanghai here in China, negotiations between the two countries. That really didn't go anywhere. No real announcements until we heard at the beginning of this week, and then obviously a lot of firing back and forth. Now, obviously, this is very concerning territory in this trade war, and also there's concern. Global markets were going down as a result of what we've been hearing. There's greater concern what kind of knock-on effect it could have in global economy, and some very strong words coming from Beijing responding to what President Trump was saying. They said this is very irresponsible. This is the central government here in Beijing. Irresponsible, and they're holding, the U.S. administration is holding America's families hostage during this trade war. Obviously, it's going to have a drag on the global economy. That's something that China is underlining. Obviously, we have to see what happens next, but there's been some very strong tit for tat at the beginning of this week.
Let's now speak to Tarra Jackson. She's a financial analyst and author. She's joining us via Skype from Wilmington in Delaware. Thanks very much for speaking to us on the NewsHour. So this decision to label China as a currency manipulator, could that be a justification to impose more tariffs in September, or is this a way for the Trump administration to gain more concessions from China?
I think it's a way for them to gain more concessions. Doreen, is exactly what you said. They've been itching, or the president's been itching to call them a currency manipulator for a very long time. Yesterday, their move, which I consider a chess move, is pretty much what gave them the reason to do that. On one hand, they were saying that their economy is really good. On the next hand, they're saying they're doing it to protect their economy. And so they pretty much, as far as the United States was concerned, they breached that act that would control that. So that gave United States the power at that point to call out currency manipulator. It's a chess move. They made one. Now the other player is calling foul and saying they're cheating. And China's coming back and saying we're not cheating. We did it just to stabilize our markets, which it did, because everything is up today. And we have no more intention of doing any more adjustments.
Yeah, but what about this tells you that China is willing to engage in more negotiations? Because we know that the U.S. and China have been involved in trade talks. There has been no results. So is it possible to see how this particular designation is going to change that situation?
Doreen, I think this is the biggest tariff testosterone fight I've ever seen. And it's causing so much uncertainty in the markets. And so it's like two fathers that are fighting against each other, and their families are getting the hit from it. I'm hoping in September they can meet, if they do meet, so that they can come to some resolution to avoid the havoc it's going to cause on the markets in the future. I say that we need to wait and see what September is going to bring if they actually, in fact, do meet.
But given that just 3 weeks ago, Tarra Jackson, the International Monetary Fund itself, said that the yuan accurately reflects China's economic fundamentals, I suppose the question is, what do you think the ultimate game plan is here for the U.S. Treasury?
Their U.S. Treasury is to get the IMF involved so it stops any other adjustments or any other moves from China. So their ultimate goal, if they can legitimately call them a currency manipulator, they can get the International Monetary Fund to do an investigation and halt any other movements. And right now, it seems like it's unfounded. I don't think anything's going to happen of it. I think we called them a currency manipulator too soon. I think if we waited 24 hours to see what was going to happen, what they were going to say. The one thing is, because they did call them out, China now says, okay, we're not going to do any more movements. We don't need to, because what we did what we wanted to do, and that was to correct the markets.
All right, Tarra Jackson, we thank you very much for joining us on the Al Jazeera NewsHour.